Special Envoy Hans Grundberg briefs the UN Security Council and says there is a light at the end of the tunnel in Yemen's war. Tim Linder King concludes a joint US-UN mission aiming to resolve the threat of the aging oil safer tanker. The World Health Organization chief warns that racism gave greater attention to Ukraine conflict other than other crises in the Middle East. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rana Swalem. Special Envoy Hans Grundberg briefed the UN Security Council yesterday and said he can see a glimmer of hope for more than 7 years conflict in Yemen. The following report has more details.
Eventually, and after a number of briefings since he took office, the UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grundberg, told the Security Council there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But Grundberg also hastened to warn that the 2-month ceasefire underway in Yemen is fragile and that reports of military operations around Ma'rib should be addressed urgently. Grundberg also said that during his first visit this week to Sana'a and after discussions with Houthi officials, he received reaffirmed commitment to all aspects of implementing the truce and held constructive conversations on next steps to strengthen and expand it. A number of ships have already entered Yemen's main port of Hodeidah, same carrying badly needed fuel, he said, and the UN and its partners are working to quickly resume commercial flights in and out of Sana'a airport. Another priority Grundberg talked about is reopening roads in southern Taiz and other areas to allow civilians on both sides of the front lines to go to work and schools. The truce, according to Grundberg, is a rare opportunity to pivot toward a peaceful future in Yemen, and the coming weeks will test the commitments by the government and the Houthis to de-escalate and uphold their agreement. In his briefing, Grundberg also welcomed the Yemeni government's newly formed Presidential Council, established last week, when the country's exiled president, Hadi, stepped aside, saying it reflects a broader array of political actors. Grundberg echoed the Security Council statement expressing the expectation that the Presidential Council will form an important step towards stability and an inclusive Yemeni-led and owned political settlement under UN auspices. The UN Special Envoy concluded his briefings by saying, Yemen will need the international community's support as much as ever to maintain the momentum and move toward finding an inclusive, peaceful and sustainable end to the conflict.
The U.S. envoy to Yemen, Tim Linder King, announced he has concluded participating in UN-led mission about safer oil tanker threat. This mission was held to raise awareness about threats that safer oil tanker poses to Yemen and the entire region. It further aimed to raise funds on May 11th for UN-led operation to remove the tanker's oil. Linder King is expected to continue working closely with David Gressly, the United Nations humanitarian chief in Yemen, to prevent the imminent catastrophe of the aging oil tanker.
Assalamu alaikum. I just finished participating in a UN-led mission to help raise awareness about the urgent need to address the imminent economic, humanitarian, and environmental threats the Safar oil tanker poses to the region. The Safar is sitting off the coast of Yemen with 1.1 million barrels of oil on board. It has not been maintained for 7 years because of the war in Yemen. As the mission comes to an end, I want to thank those that have already committed funding. The United States encourages donors to make these funds available immediately to protect commerce, tourism, livelihoods, and coastal habitats in the Red Sea. A leak or an explosion on board this decaying ship will be an environmental and economic disaster and will impact the entire region, including African countries, not just Yemen. We must capitalize on the momentum before us. After the UN humanitarian coordinator and the Houthis' appointed representative signed a memorandum of understanding last month agreeing to cooperate with plans to offload the oil to another, more stable vessel. It is imperative that the Houthis abide by this agreement and cooperate with international efforts to address this looming threat.
The world-leading environmental organizations have voiced concerns over the potential threat of safer oil tanker. A recent research study by the Greenpeace organization has indicated that possible spills can have disastrous consequences, not only on the marine life in the Red Sea, but also on people's health. More details on the story are within this report.
Leading environmental group Greenpeace warned Thursday of a potential major oil leak or explosion on an aging oil tanker moored off of Yemen's Red Sea coast and used as a bargaining chip by the Iran-backed Houthi militias. The neglected vessel, kept under guard, is loaded with more than 1 million barrels of crude oil. Greenpeace released a report listing the environmental, humanitarian and economic impact of a potential oil spill from Saifa on the conflict-riddled Yemen and the Red Sea region in general. Last month, a Yemeni government official said there was an oil leak from the tanker. The UN has constantly warned of the catastrophic impact of a potential leak from the aging and neglected tanker. However, none of its diplomatic efforts to resolve the matter has materialized. Last year, the United Nations accused the rebels of using the tanker as a bargaining chip to advance their political agenda in Yemen. The 42-page Greenpeace report argues that an oil spill or explosion on the tanker would lead to disclosure of desalination plants in Yemen, which will eventually disrupt the supply of drinking water to nearly 10 million people. A major spill would also lead to the closure of Yemen's western ports, including Hodeidah and Salif, through which 68% of aid is brought into the Arab world's poorest country, the report said. Up to 8.4 million people relying on food aid supplies would be affected, said the Amsterdam-based advocacy group. An oil leak would also cause the closure of fisheries, the rise of air pollution levels in the region, and the disruption of shipping traffic through Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the Suez Canal, said the report. Experts say maintenance is no longer possible because the damage to the ship is irreversible. The question is no longer whether the catastrophe will happen. The question is, when will it happen?
A team from UN mission to support Hodeidah agreement visited 3 demining sites in Hodeidah. This came as part of the Ummah's efforts to strengthen its coordination role in demining action in the governorate. During the visit, Ummah renewed its commitment to supporting accelerated mine action to allow the children, women and men in Hodeidah to live their lives without fear. The United Nations has announced the release of $100 million to combat hunger in 6 African countries and Yemen. The fund will enable the UN agencies to provide critical support, including food, cash, nutritional help, and medical services. Projects will also be tailored to help women and girls who face additional risks due to the Yemeni crisis. The U.S. State Department welcomed the formation of the Presidential Leadership Council in Yemen. They stated that they hope the council will address the urgent needs of the Yemeni people. They also urged the council to cooperate fully with comprehensive United Nations-led peace efforts. This came after a statement issued by the UN Security Council, which included future responsibilities for the Presidential Leadership Council. Chargé d'Affaires of U.S. Embassy to Yemen met with the head of the Presidential Leadership Council, Rashad Al-Alimi. The U.S. diplomat welcomed the Council's commitment to the UN-brokered truce and to realizing the aspirations of all Yemenis for peace and prosperity. They further discussed Yemenis' common desire for improved governance, security, and economic stability. A senior UN official said the Houthi militia arrested 2 UN employees in Sana'a. This came in a briefing by the UN Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs. He pointed out that the Houthi militia hasn't released the 2 United Nations employees in Sana'a for 5 months now. The World Health Organization Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus has questioned the global attention given to the Ukraine crisis in comparison to the ongoing emergencies in Ethiopia, Yemen, Afghanistan, Palestine, and Syria. The following report has more details.
The World Health Organization's Director General has criticized the international community's emphasis on the Ukrainian conflict, claiming that crises abroad, notably in his home country of Ethiopia, are not being given similar attention, presumably because the people impacted are people of color. Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus questioned whether the world truly devotes equal attention to black and white lives, given that the ongoing crises in Ethiopia, Yemen, Afghanistan, and Syria have received just a fraction of the attention paid to Ukraine. He acknowledged that the conflict in Ukraine was serious on a global scale, but questioned whether other issues were receiving enough attention.
The whole attention to Ukraine is very important, of course, because it impacts the whole world. But even a fraction of it is not being given to Tigray, Yemen, Afghanistan, Syria, and the rest. A fraction. And I need to be blunt and honest that the world is not treating the human race same way. Some are more equal than others. And when I say this, it pains me because I see it. Very difficult to accept, but it's happening.
Yemen has been torn apart by civil conflict since 2014, when Iran-backed Houthi rebels seized control of the capital Sana'a and much of the country's north, compelling the government to evacuate the south and eventually to Saudi Arabia. According to statistics from the Armed Conflict Location and Event Project from 2022, the conflict has subsequently evolved into a regional proxy war that has killed more than 150,000 individuals, including more than 15,500 civilians. More than 17 million Yemenis are now facing severe food insecurity, with food prices doubling since last year. Yemen's health sector is crippled due to the armed conflict, economic deterioration, and institutional breakdown. Under the weight of the conflict, functional health infrastructure has become more limited. Only 50% of health facilities are fully operating at the moment, and more than 80% of the population has problems acquiring food and drinking water, as well as gaining access to health care. A shortage of human resources and supplies has severely impeded healthcare services.
The Houthi militia forces citizens to give up part of the World Food Program aid. Local sources in Amran Governorate confirmed that the militia in Dark Habur district continues to pressure citizens to return part of the WFP aid. This came after the militia failed to force them to give it up before it was distributed by the organization's officials. Coming next. Al Mirba' is a popular market in Hais, revived after liberation from the Houthi militia.
هذا هو محل استهداف الحواث الذين استهدفوا المواطنين وهم نائمين. هذا هو الصاروخ. من الساعة 4 ماشينا بابا من الحوثي في المخيم. هذا يعني استشهدوا أولاد عمي، هذا استشهدوا يعني أخواني كلهم يعني شوف يعني الدم في الخيم. الدم في الخيم يعني في كل مكان، يعني رؤوسهم ما التقوش، الراس ما التقاش، الراس ما التقاش.
Welcome back. Hais district in Hodeidah has been liberated recently from the rule of the Houthi militia. Life started to get back to normal. One sign of such a normal life is the return of Al Mirba' market. This market is held on every Monday. The following report has more details.
In the south of Hodeidah Governorate, the popular market in the city of Hais, which is known as Al Mirba', is held weekly, and it represents a popular importance for thousands of shoppers and sellers who come from outside the city to buy and sell. Al Mirba' is a popular market visited by shoppers every Monday of the week, in which the historic city of Hais was known for it. After the city has witnessed liberation, the market breathed a sigh of relief and life returned to it, and it further observed a commercial movement.
We thank God for the market return in our country. We are happy to see people in the market again. We've been deprived of this scene for a long time.
The manifestations of preparation for the market begin on Sunday evening, and its climax begins after the dawn prayer, with the arrival of vendors coming from outside the city. Scenes vary between foodstuffs, vegetables, and various types of grains that are available at Tihama farms. Hais is distinguished from other neighboring cities by some local products, most notably the Haisi sweets, in addition to pottery industry for domestic use, and a number of handicrafts made from palm fronds. In Mirba', there are divisions that the weekly market can void off, a section for sheep and another for cows, and near them the bird section. These kinds of trade constitute a major weekly source of income for thousands of Mirba' sellers. These scenes were not as they are today, before the military security of the Directorate was achieved, due to the conditions of instability in the city and the continuous Houthi bombing of its residents. The city that was and still occupying a strategic position and an important part of Yemeni civilization and historical sites.
10 terror suspects escaped from Sayoun Central Prison in Hadramaut. A document issued by the 1st Military Region confirmed that some of the prisoners belong to Al-Qaeda terrorist organization. The document further stressed on the speedy investigation and the arrest of wanted prisoners. 7 Houthi trespassing attempts were thwarted in Ma'rib and Hajjah within 24 hours. Military source said that the government forces thwarted Houthi attempts towards Rish Front, Al-Faya and Al-Shahid sites. They added that members of government forces and tribes started firing Houthi militants and forced them to flee. Houthi militia stormed a mosque in the district of Naqm in Sana'a Governorate. It further assaulted worshippers and prevented them from performing their prayers. Local residents said that members of Houthi militia stormed Al-Iman Mosque in Naqm neighborhood for the 2nd day in a row. Economists demanded the neutralization of economy from the conflict. They called on unification of monetary management in order to achieve balance and restore the value of the national currency. The experts expressed their hope to benefit from the UN truce and reassemble the fragmented Yemeni economy. The Houthi militia requires delivery of oil revenues to reduce the price of fuel in Sana'a. They have recently approved the price of 12,600 riyals for a 20-liter tank at official and commercial fuel stations. This angered the citizens for the exploitation of their needs, despite the low exchange rates and crude oil in the global markets. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Special Envoy Hans Grunberg briefs the UN Security Council and says there is a light at the end of the tunnel in Yemen war. Tim Lindriking concludes a joint US-UN mission aiming to resolve the threat of the aging oil safer tanker. The World Health Organization chief warns that racism gave greater attention to Ukraine conflict other than other crises in the Middle East. This is the end of the news. For more, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Yemen Today English. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.